October 7th, didn't we? This is going to get taken the wrong way. Anyway, October 8th. Okay, so about 7 months ago, since you were here, that episode was my most viewed podcast I've ever done.
Wow.
By far. It was, I think, it got like 4 million views or something like that. I know it broke 2 million on YouTube, it broke 1 million on Spotify, and then I think between the others got on. So anyway, I had...
Okay, what's up, everyone? It's that time of week again where we do a sort of a deep dive, deep take on whatever celebrity or anything to do with libertarianism or objectivism, or and so I decided to pick this Nick Fuentes and David Smith interview they did. And so we're going to do a full kind of from anarcho-capitalist, agorist, radical objectivist breakdown, my view of this brand new, well, this interview came out a week ago, David Smith interview. Or was it Monday? When was that? I was going to say October. It's not October. Yeah. So this is actually... this debate came out in May 18th, 2026. So that's when this came out, just about a week ago or so. And so this is be interesting, little fascinating clash between these one guy's like a nationalist, the other guy's like a paleoconservative, identity politics, and libertarian skepticism. But through my framework, we're going to analyze this through my framework. It's going to be strong anti-empire, anti-war points that align with Rothbard and Mises. But we have major red flags we'll be looking at here on collectivism, tribalism, and statism that Rand and Konkin would shred. And no sacred cows here. We're going to be looking at the truth, reason, individual rights, and voluntary markets. So, so the first clip was the introductions, and so the setup here is that this is actually a follow-up from an interview they did in October 2025 episode. Dave, the libertarian comedian with the Jewish heritage, he platforms Nick, American First Catholic integralist. He's known for his white identity advocacy and strong Israel critiques. So what they're going to cover in this interview was they're going to cover censorship, Trump wars, Tucker's beef, and more. So for my agorist view, platforming across these lines is a healthy gray market idea. But don't forget, we must judge these ideas by reason, reality, not tribe. So let's get, because I think they jump in right away with censorship and deplatforming. Yeah, from around the 0 to about 5 minute mark. So let's listen to a little bit of this and see what they say before we do a critique.
Tucker and Candace on my show in that stretch, but our episode was the most viewed one, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I mean, obviously those guys are enormous. I'm not trying to downplay that, but it was something particularly interesting. You're a guy who
they want the analytics because they want to know the demographics we're reaching, how big the
So let's just skip to where they talk about censorship.
audience is. And what's funny is something like Twitter. In order to get your analytics on Twitter to see age, race, etc., you need premium. So it's like not only can I and my team, we can't even access the platforms, even on the ones we have, can't even get the numbers. So we can't even supply the numbers to get paid by a sponsor. So yeah, I mean, when you're censored, it's like there's no records. It's
Right.
like a book burning thing, because it's like you just have none of the information available at all.
which in a weird way just seems bad for everyone.
Okay, so here they're talking about the Nick's ongoing censorship. And he's gonna Dave's gonna talk about how Nick's clips are just sort of everywhere, but he still has restriction on the major platforms. So he's gonna
Like, I'm
talk
not
about
sure who benefits from that, because it's kind of like at this point they're in this weird I don't know, like gray area where you're like, well, it's not okay. At a point, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, it was at least working to shut you up to some degree. It was relegating you to a corner. At this point, it's like you're all over the algorithm everywhere, and all it creates is this situation like that where you're like, in some ways, it's like maybe they don't want it to be known exactly how big you are.
See, this kind of highlights my Ancap take here. It's the state corporate collusion, right? That's what they're talking about here. That's at the crux of it. It's suppressing speech. So Dave mentioned how Nick's clips are just everywhere, but they're being restricted. So like to elaborate on that a little more, like true free speech is rooted in property rights, right? And the platform owners decide. But as Ancap, we counter with alternatives, decentralized tech, parallel economies, agorism, classic agorism. Begging for reinstatement concedes the system's legitimacy. Yeah. So that's kind of what's happening here. When they're begging to be reinstated, just sort of legitimizes the state corporate entity. So what happens is censorship often just protects the bad ideas from scrutiny. And don't forget, sunlight and rational debate are the answer. So let's keep hearing a little bit more before we get into the debates with Republicans. They're going to continue with this idea here.
But I don't know. I found that to be very interesting. Yeah. So I wanted a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. A lot's happened since last time we talked.
Yes.
Jeez.
Okay. So they finished up with the censorship here. Let me elaborate a little bit more on that censorship because I have some more in my notes here. Yeah, so they okay, some counter economics. Okay, I've got some more notes here. Okay, depopulating censorship. Where's the bond over Israel? Okay, they're talking about Israel. That's later. Let's see here. Okay, I don't have anything else. Let's continue on here. All right. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so coming up next, now they finished talking about the censorship. They're going to go on to talk about the debates with the Republicans and Trump skepticism. And yeah, they mentioned Crowder too here. So let's get in here. Censorship. Here's where we're at. We need to get here. I'm glad they put these timestamps in here. All right, here we go.
Said on literally every single issue, you're getting the GOP talking point. You're getting the memo. Like on Iran, for example, I remember when they launched the war, everybody obviously said, well, what happened to no new wars? And is this not literally identical to Iraq? It's a question about WMDs, and they're killing the protesters, and we're going to do regime change and make it a democracy. Like very similar in many ways, especially how it played out in the lead up to the war. And
yeah, they're going to mention Crowder, Crowder types. Anyway, related to Crowder types and Trump wielding powder, not powder, but power.
Everybody obviously recognizes that's a deep fundamental betrayal of Trumpism, which was always about bringing the troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, putting America first, the rest of it. And I remember what the Republicans said on Twitter is, well, Trump always said we were going to war with Iran because he said they should never have a nuclear weapon. And then the other
yeah, right. Okay. So yeah, so they kind of go back and forth. Dave and Nick will both express their frustrations with the GOP talking points. And what they're talking about here is they're excusing the wars. That's the GOP excusing the wars. Let's continue here a little bit more because they're going to go off this a little bit more about the GOP talking points.
They said was, well, he said no forever wars. And the real forever war is the war Iran has been waging on us, and we're putting an end to it. And you go, yeah, that really stretches the bounds of what anybody could credibly believe, in good faith. And so that was something that came up in the debate, and you just go, yeah, no, you're kind of missing the point here. Like, if he campaigned on we're going to bomb Iran for regime change for years in a war of choice, I don't think anybody would be lining up to vote for that. He said no new.
Well, that's good, though. I mean, for an ANCAP perspective here, that's definitely a win because it does show that skepticism of sort of the lesser of two evils in politics, right? He wanted the forever wars, but not really. and the broken promises and the no new wars they just mentioned there. But Rothbard there would cheer on this kind of exposure of the warfare state. And we know politicians fib, and the state expands. So so the critique here is going to be heavy focus on who wields state power, and they talk about Trump and Massey too. So let's go on.
Wars, and now they want to introduce this technicality to kind of get out of that. So
Yes.
to me, that really characterizes, I don't know that it's bad faith, but it almost feels like you're arguing with a brick wall. It's like you're not really being totally honest.
Dude, there's a certain I've been talking about this a lot lately, but there's a certain like category of kind of MAGA influencers or whatever, and I'm not talking about like the Israel lobby. Like I'm not talking about Ben Shapiro or Barry Weiss or something like that. I'm talking about
Crowder.
Benny Johnson or Steven Crowder or Will Chamberlain, guys like this, where
those types.
It feels like, as you're saying here, right? They go, okay, so the talking point is, we've been at war with them for 47 years and ending the wars. Okay, well, if it's been going for 47 years, why wasn't that the campaign? Why weren't any of you saying this at the time? And then it's like, as the goalposts move, they will move with them. I debated Will Chamberlain on Piers Morgan's show like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they're going to continue this kind of back and forth for a little bit more, and then there's going to be a heavy focus on what they're going to talk about, who wields the state power, Trump, Massey, or him. So instead of abolishing it.
Maybe 3 weeks ago now, and he says because of the pressure that we're putting on Iran with our blockade of their blockade, he goes, I'll be surprised if this regime makes it another month. And so then I said, in another month, when this regime is still standing, I will mention that to you, and you will move the goalposts and still support this one. So we got about a week until.
Yeah, moving the goalposts. I just mentioned that. Who wields the state power there? So according to agorism, we reject all this editorial theater because we want to build more like counter economies daily. And of course, objectivism, we reject any kind of strongman savior narrative. We believe in the rational self-interest, and that what does that demand? That demands the ending of the empire, not reforming it. But they don't go into reforming it really. I mean, they don't go into like abolishing it. They think they can reform it because remember, Dave Smith types like this are like neo-prags. Pragmatists. They believe in some wobbly bobblies, wiggle room, center. No, I don't. We want to slowly abolish the state and starve the beast. Okay, let's continue on a little bit more.
This is up, and there's just this thing where in the 12-day war, they would have said, see, no American casualties, no more than that. Then this one, we have American casualties. Yeah, but it's only been a few. And at a certain point, you're like,
okay, they just go back and forth with this goalpost moving rhetoric.
Talking to the White House press secretary.
Let me see. I want to skip.
It's all him. He gets to sit down on day one and do this photo op where he signs all the. But what's the problem with that, Nick? Is that day one? I guarantee you, day one of the next Democratic presidency is going to be them doing the exact same.
Yeah. Those passed a bunch of executive orders. That's the Blue Gang. When the Blue Gang gets back in office, they'll definitely just be doing the same thing. More federal mandates, more spending bills. It's not going to change anything. So yeah, who wields the power? That's kind of the point that they're making here. And but as subjectivists, we reject that whole strong man savior complex. Okay, so I think I covered some of that.
It's not.
Let's move on to the next section. Oh yeah, Trump wielding power. That's kind of what we just talked about that. Let's hear some of that. Let me get in the middle of it. Because I don't want to sit here and do the whole 3-hour debate.
Here's a point where he said they're committing genocide, and she said they're committing genocide. It's like, yeah, and they go, horseshoe theory proved. And you're like, okay, but, there's a middle part of that horseshoe, too.
Right.
Like, also, Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump and Mark Levin. And, you know what I mean? Like, they all say the same thing. You could do the same thing about them all saying, we can't allow them to have nuclear weapons or whatever. Like, this just doesn't prove anything. And when it comes to this war in Iran, it seems to me that, like, if you're for it, there is no meaningful way that we are on the same team.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. At least they're doing that critique there. Let's see. Now they are going to go into the war in Iran. Here it is. Let's skip to that ahead. Okay. Skip ahead. So they're going to talk about how this war might risk escalation. And let's listen to.
There were a few others, but I mean, these are two, the Democratic secretaries of state and presidential nominees who came out and just said exactly what you said. They could. Netanyahu was always trying to get all of us to do that. Like, this is just open now. It's just like, this is the obvious thing. It's like, well, yeah, we all know Netanyahu's trying to get us into these wars, but you don't do it. You give him some. You don't give him all of them, you know? And then we're to look back at Obama as if he stood up to the Israel lobby or something.
Yeah, here they're going to talk about the neo-conservative, neo-lib trap, and also the parallels to the past wars and disasters.
Like that. It's like he gave him Libya and Syria, so like he didn't really stab. But yes, even he did say we won't do this one. Even George W. Bush stood up to Dick Cheney and the neocons on this one.
Yeah,
and it was because of the military realities of going after Iran. It's been interesting to watch. I know. Like, I've seen some of your coverage of this, and I think both of us, we're trying to be fair about this. We were both kind of, after the 6-Day War, I certainly was questioning, because, well, if after this, that's all he has to show for it, is that Iran is transformed into a global power who now has this ace in the hole. They can close the strait anytime they want. That's a disaster. And Donald Trump, and that's still his best option.
Point still. And that is the first one, which has been the one from the very beginning, which is enrichment. And the United States says you cannot have enrichment, not at a low level.
Okay, yeah, that's what they're talking about here. This is the non-interventionist as self-interest, not altruism. We're talking about Ayn Rand altruism. She was against altruism, the evils of altruism. So like Rand condemned the sacrificial foreign policy. This is what this is they're talking about here. Ending the foreign aid and entanglements is just pure Ancap. Yeah, that's as we want. So that this aligns well with Ancap to a certain extent. Of course, the military-industrial complex, it feeds all the inflation and taxation. So yeah, as the Agorist, you want to starve via the Agorist withdrawal. But Dave's libertarian foreign policy here is solid, right? Nick's angle adds nationalist flavor a little bit. But that's kind of more collectivist. But we separate the valid anti-war points from group identity framing. Yeah, be careful with that. Let's continue on.
There can never be a sunset clause. There needs to be a permanent moratorium and no enrichment at all. And why does Trump in particular have to insist upon this? Because he tore up the JCPOA. And what was the problem with the JCPOA? It sunsetted. It allowed them to enrich at low levels, and then after 10 years, it went away. So if Trump were to get anything less than zero enrichment, then he looks like an idiot. Yeah. He looks...
Okay. So that's about it on that segment there. So the next segment was going to be criticisms of Trump, Buchanan, and Thomas Massie. So I'm going to talk about the deep Trump betrayals discussion here. And also the Buchanan as the influence, and they do praise Massie a bit. But we know that Massie lost. So let's go on to the next section, listen to some of that, see how that pans out.
Venezuela or Cuba, they don't have a country like Israel sabotaging diplomacy and provoking through deception and lobbying for escalation. So even if you get someone like Trump that says...
So that's what they're going to be doing in this section, too. They're going to be calling out the... power abuses here. Yeah, and praise the Massie who has the more restrained voice in this debate here.
All right, we're just going to call it, I'm going to take the hit. Well, is there someone you forgot to ask? We need permission, actually, and they're always going to sabotage it. So I think you're right. I don't know that it's a certainty, but yeah, there's very few options where this works out for us.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I agree. It's not a certainty. And kind of the thing that makes it not a certainty is that Donald Trump himself is such a wild card. And you could see him just spinning it as how great it was, but I don't think anyone will believe him, but I think you're right about that. Particularly, like the political incentives for Donald Trump are so bad, and then the survival incentives for Iran. And you could really watch from the 12-day war to this war how much that you flip the incentive structure, and it's like in the sense that if someone comes to my house with a gun and they pull a gun on me and they go, they're like, give me, and I'm like, okay, hey, just calm down. What do you want? I'll give you my money, blah blah. And then they go, no, I'm here for your kids.
Okay,
Goes, well,
let's get to the
so forth. And it's like, getting back to the generational coalition in 2024 that won this election, I remember the exuberance when we won in 24, when Trump won in 24. They were
okay. I want to get to the part where they
calling it a golden
talk about
age. It was RFK Jr., Elon Musk. You had all this political capital to fix a lot of things. It would have been
so that's what they're talking about here. They're getting into like sort of this objectivist red line here. Every good politicians, they operate within the coercive monopoly. So what they're saying is that the consistent position is voluntarism, no rulers. But Agorists, we don't wait for Massey or Trump. We exit and build.
Popular to do, like Doge, cutting the deficit and cutting the debt. Mass deportations, building a wall, all those things they promised to do, and they squandered that political capital, the $7 gas, the inflation, unpopular, on the war. And you think about what if in an alternate timeline, they took the $200 billion from the big, beautiful bill for DHS, and they actually did...
And that's in my previous video when I talked about Trump being a socialist. All that, those spending he's doing, he's spending our money.
Mass deportations and follow through. Trump's approval rating would go down. People would die. It would get ugly. But the right wing would rally behind him. They would say, because we're fighting for America. They would say, this is existential. Getting these illegal aliens out, it is, on some level, about taking control back from the Democrats. It is about taking control back from foreigners, putting Americans first.
But see, they're not advocating for any kind of abolishment of the state. They just want to still work within the coercive monopoly. Yeah, they're not really. They don't really have an exit here. This is the problem with neoprags. Let's see. If we will listen to more of this.
Say, we feel good about this. We feel good about the conflict. It's ugly. There's going to be a cost. There would have been inflation. The Wall Street Journal was always warning about that, saying you deport all these illegal aliens, labor cost goes up, demand goes down, you're going to get some inflation. But people would have been on board because of what it is.
The thing is, you know how much money that will cost just to do all that deporting? I mean, you think about the mess you're in with this immigration thing. Either you keep the people here and give them all the free gibs, the free housing and the free EBT cards. That costs money too, the free phones. But at the same time, you're going to deport them, which will also cost money and resources. So what do? That's the question. For this particular segment here about immigration. What do you do about the immigration? Do you want to enforce it? Well, that uses force and coercion by the state. And also it's going to cost money and resources to do it, no matter what you do. If you keep them here, it's going to cost millions of dollars. Yeah. So if you have a suggestion or maybe a comment about that, go ahead and leave a comment in the down below, or just leave a comment in the chat here, because it just seems like it's a mess. I mean, yeah, just...
Same thing with the indictments, like you mentioned earlier, about Obama with Tulsi Gabbard in June last year, or the Clintons for that matter, or any of them. People really would have been there for it, but they squandered all those things in pursuit of another country's priorities and foreign policy or even domestic policy. And there's one thing that stood out to me when this conversation was happening. When we launched this war in Iran, all the Trump supporters had to defend it. This cadre of influencers.
Okay, we already mentioned that. We heard that already.
Donald Trump was going to be president in 2016. So, there are maybe someone will emerge. And
see, they're going to wait for someone to emerge. We're not going to wait. We have options available now, but so there's no point in waiting for a Massey or a Trump to exit, and we just want to exit and just start building rather than just waiting. And these guys, these prags here, want to wait, thinking that somehow if we just wait a little bit, it might get better or might turn around.
Crowder kept saying, yeah, but that comes with risks. Yeah,
Right.
Nothing doesn't come with risks. Your plan comes with the risk of your plan is that either Gavin Newsom or AOC will be president. You want to just say, put the blinders on, forget that we just launched.
But the blue gang will come into office eventually. And they already talked about this earlier, what they're going to do. Lots of executive orders and more federal mandates and more spending. Okay. So I guess, what do? Just give up or just wait for a Massey or Trump? Why not exit now? Why not just exit now? Okay, so the next part, the next segment, let's shift over here. Okay, so in the next section is going to be, okay, they do talk about Pat McKinnon here. That's pretty much the same. I'll skip that. I don't care about that. Thomas Massey election. Charlie Kirk. There you go. I want to get to that next section because, okay, whatever. Let's get to this.
You're the one who fucking cheats all over your wife and fucks porn stars and has had 3 different marriages and shit. This guy, he lost his wife to a suicide bomber in Syria, a war you were supposed to get us out of and didn't, and now you're trashing him for getting married 2 years later? Just so bizarre, man.
So right here, there's kind of shifting conservative opinions around, and then they're just going to do personal exchanges. Let's hear some.
He is. He's wicked. He's a wicked human being. And he's really showed his hand. I mean, because you're right. 10 years ago, I think the way people saw it is that the left was so powerful and so evil. It felt like they were unstoppable and nothing could ever change. It was so oppressive and suffocating. I remember it growing up. The political correctness, the liberal media, and it just felt like Republicans were pussies. Like they could never win and they would never fight back. And, you know, it was guys like Mitt Romney and John McCain. They were complete losers.
They're there to lose, essentially. Like that's the point of them, is to lose it. It's like wrestling, like to lose and get this guy over while
exactly.
I live,
They were there to basically, it's a fix. You know, they were there to throw. And so you see Trump, and he was what he was, but we said, okay, he's the underdog. He's fighting for us. He's brash. He's a little unconventional, but maybe he can win. And now you kind of see all these years later, I think that maybe his true self just emerged. You realize, like, he sort of is everything they said that he was, which is he is a liar. It is really all just about vanity and glory and his own, what's the word, self-aggrandizement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I talked about this before in my other video that Trump is a socialist. He's pretty much no different than any other one. But he did. This is Nick's point that he was talking about how he was advertised as an outsider, and he was spending his own money so he couldn't be corrupted. Well, he ended up being corrupted by Israel. So what these next couple of sections here, I don't know if I want to go through all of them now. Maybe just skip to the Chud the Builder thing. But basically, what's happening here is just showing that they're talking about the Overton window sort of movement on the foreign policy in Israel. It is kind of valuable for discourse, but when you apply reason, analyze the lobby via public choice, what they call public choice theory, predictable interest groups. It's not monolithic ethnic conspiracies. So basically, just sort of end all the foreign aid and let voluntary boycotts and markets handle associations. So that's basically kind of summarizing these next couple of sections here up and past the Tucker Carlson part. I want to get to the Chud. Let's get to that part because. Yeah, they're going to talk a little bit more about internet culture in Venezuela, of course, and cultural and demographic patterns.
Host or something like that, where he can actually kind of make points. Right? Donald Trump would just have slogans and dismiss them and win with bravado, but he can actually get in and argue. But he's just not a charismatic figure. Which is kind of a prerequisite for leadership. It just kind of is what it is. But being attached to this administration, I think that's all over. I think that it is possible here that you and Tucker are kind of talking past each other. And I think that there's, again, keeping ages in mind, there is something where, look, obviously, like I am, I guess, to some degree, an economic populist, but with a very different economic program than, say, a left-leaning populist would have. I think that there is a real point to be made that the regime.
Okay, they're going to come up to their disagreement too pretty soon within this segment. and it's going to be the racial religious collectivism. Yeah. But overall, this first point here is just more they're talking about cultural and demographic patterns, and they're saying it's real and discussable. And of course, the objectivist point of view, we allow more like private discrimination and free association, or freedom from association, and a freedom of disassociation. Let's see. Yeah, I kind of want to get into a little bit what the next section is going to be about here: the racial religious collectivism, the white advocacy, and the Catholic order. Now, I did a video about the Catholic, or was it Orthodox Christianity and the libertarianism? Go watch that one too. Okay, so they're going to have some clashes with the radical, and this does clash. This sort of religious collectivism that Nick gets into does clash with the radical objectivist individualism. I'll get to what Ayn Rand called, what she called racist.
Doesn't like focusing on economic realities. And that really is at the heart of a lot of what the problem is in America. Now, those economic realities are a reality because of other problems, so it's complicated. But, you know, like the fact that the average first-time home buyer is 40 is death to a nation. Like that's, if you have that, then me and you talking about social conservatism is just a fucking exercise in futility. It doesn't matter, dude. If 25-year-old guys can't afford to get a house, you know, like you have to be you in order to afford to get a fucking house at 25. Maybe not at 25, but now you could. Whatever. I don't know when you were allowed to make money again. But I'm just saying, like, so I do think that, like, I understand the perspective of thinking that, like, look, these kind of, like, racialist issues and culture war issues and all of these things, they do distract from the fact that the entire economy is rigged on behalf of the powerful and is absolutely just devastating young people. And I do think that I think you speak to a lot of.
Yeah, here's where we're gonna clash here with the racial religious collectivism.
That I think is part of the reason why in this time a voice like yours is so popular and powerful, is because, like, yeah, like a lot of the people you're talking to, and I think you're talking to older people as well at this point, but a lot of the people you're talking to are the ones who are dealing with this economic reality. And so I get his point in.
Yeah, like I said, this is just talking about the demographic patterns, that they're real. But I kind of want to get more into what he's going to get after Nick here, Nick's racial religious collectivism, because this definitely clashes with the radical individualism. And so to Ayn Rand, what she called racism, she called the crudest collectivism. Because, you know, the individual is sovereign, judged by the character and actions. But isn't that what they did during the late 60s? They were actually judging the character, not by the skin tone. But the whole point of agorism is to prioritize voluntary exchange over identity blocks. That's the overall point I wanted to make at this section, is that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to prioritize the voluntary exchange over this identity racial blocks.
From his perspective, perhaps thinking that, like, yeah, talking about, like, race and stuff like this is a distraction. I also think that there's a desire that I also share. This might be part of my generation too. But there's a desire that I have, and of course I'm Jewish, so it's hard to ever be the one. Now, I'm not going to be the one who will ever convince people of this, so I accept that. But there's a desire to be like, hey, dude, you can really oppose Israel. You can really oppose all these wars. You can really oppose all this shit without getting into some ugly shit where it's just, like, directed at people. Right. And I understand that that's.
Eventually, in the next section, they're going to start talking about the Israel influence. And they're talking about the lobbying, too, the Israel lobby. Let me hold on here.
Not what you're saying. Like, you're not saying, like, this. In fact, I've heard you, without being asked, just say on your show that I'm not saying it's all Jews. And I'm not saying there's anything like, and you shouldn't be, I don't know, you shouldn't be shitty to any person because of an immutable characteristic. And you've made very clear that everyone should be protected under the law.
But see, the thing is, objectivism, radical objectivism, does allow for private discrimination and freedom of association. Because the First Amendment, the first two ingredients of the First Amendment is the private property and freedom of association and disassociation. It allows that. But since the civil rights laws were passed in the mid-'60s, that pretty much killed the idea of freedom of association. It pretty much, the civil rights laws are pretty much a parallel, or a constitution that runs in parallel with our, with the I was going to say the Constitution, but that was the second Constitution. It's the first Constitution was the Articles of Confederation. So that's kind of the point. And so
on things like that. But there is an energy to your movement that I think it just, like you talk about low IQ anti-Semitism. That's not unique to you or your audience. All of us.
Oh, no. I clicked the wrong button. That's fine. All right, let's get to the
unique to you or your audience. All of us have our low IQ portion of our audience. There are low IQ
It just goes on and on.
Have said this for a very long time, and for a long time, people didn't even have a clue what I was talking about. They thought it was ridiculous, but we actually are a moderating force in a very good way, in the sense that, people do look to me as the radical, the dissident, the guy for those issues. And I am a Christian. I am Catholic. We are against that stuff. And so, like, I think, for example, last time we spoke, there were those Goyim Defense League guys in Florida. They were shooting Jewish people with water guns. Yeah, and I said, that's not going anywhere good. And now it's this situation with Chud the Builder. And
yeah, they're talking about Chud the Builder here. Let's see. So what are they talking about here? They're starting to get into Chud the Builder, but Dave, though, I think eventually Dave's state-focused critique is aid as theft. Blowback is strong. Yeah. Broader, keep talking about the JQ framing and the questions. So the broader JQ framing and the question here, the JQ question, risk collectivist overreach, right? Because we believe the radical individualism. And so the solution, well, what do you think the solution would be? It would be full privatization of defense. So no welfare, abolish the welfare, foreign aid too, and property rights, when you keep property rights, and individuals and voluntary groups, not tribes or states. So that's what Nick is advocating here, the opposite of objectivism.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of hate for this. I'm getting shit on for it. You're right.
I mean, the one thing you have to hand it to them, it is anti-war realism, and that's, they get that right. But this collectivist stuff here, they get wrong.
People are saying, oh, he's a free speech martyr, he's a warrior, whatever. And you want to say, yeah, I mean, do we want to live in a society where everybody's a public nuisance, live streaming, challenging everybody to a fight? And it's just not nice. I mean, the hill we want to die on is that if people commit crimes to get arrested, and people are considerate and polite in public, we just...
Okay, it just sort of continues on with this. Let's kind of bring it all together now with kind of overall assessment now and framework. If you have another opinion about this, let me know about in the chat or in the comment box. But the strengths here, the major strengths in this debate here would be the anti-war realism, like I said. They talked about the censorship at the beginning and the platforming debate, and the exposing the GOP foreign policy hypocrisy. All right, that's a good. However, their weakness here, statism creep, because Dave is a neo-prag, and he still believes that the state should involve some sort of coercive force to enforce immigration. And of course, Nick here is advocating identity collectivism over egoism and reason, and the more political focus versus counter-economics. So we want counter-economics. So from my point of view, from an anarcho-capitalist point of view, the state is the root of the problem. So there's no capture or reforming it at all. You cannot reform the state. It's corrupt. And then, of course, agorism, what we want to do is we want to build a parallel voluntary systems. Radical objectivism, put that together with the radical objectives, we get reason, rational self-interest, and individual rights above all. No gods, no tribe, or altruistic sacrifices. So this interview does reveal the sort of the right-wing fractures. So we want to kind of use interviews like this to push consistent radical alternative, more like pure liberty, markets, and sovereign individuals. So what they do at the end here, let's let's see, closing. Did they have a Q&A? Yeah, chat Q&A. Let's see. I say, yeah. So if you have anything that you'd like to add now, go ahead and say something in the chat. Any question you might have or any comments about my take on this interview here. Because it does get kind of back and forth, like I agree with you kind of stuff. It just sort of, it gets too circle jerky. So if you have any valuable truth, anything at all, let me know in the comment section below. So yeah, let me see here. I do have other notes here. Maybe I want to get into a little bit. Okay, so the critique overall on that. Let me get to the positives. So again, let me go a little more detail about the positives here about this interview. Was anti-war, anti-empire. It does offer excellent critiques of the endless foreign wars, entanglements there. I found Iran war risks, the escalation traps, and the neocons and neolibs, and the state, the U.S. empire, as a war machine funded by inflation, taxation. That is pure Rothbardian insight. Trump's no new wars betrayal fits the pattern of politicians. What else is new? As liars who expand the military industrial complex. We know Massey lost, but he was a rare congressional restraint voice, is noted positively. Okay, they had a positive view on Massey. Overall, the censorship and deplatforming, Fuentes here experiences underscore how the states and allied tech corporate power suppresses dissent. Does it talk about a state interference in corporations and how it undercuts free market laissez-faire capitalism with the state interference in the private companies? Of course, Agorist here counter this via the decentralized tech. So yeah, we want counter economics, black and gray markets, alternative platforms, and so you should not. That's the thing. He wants to be reinstated. Don't beg reinstatement, because that just emboldens the state. That legitimizes the state. The Trump criticism is right on, as the criticism Trump for wielding power, e.g. the wars and the betrayals, and it aligns with the rejecting the lesser of two evils political trap. Yeah. Politics, is a scam. Real change is counter-economic. Let's see, critiques here. Critiques of this interview. Heavy focus on electoral politics. They talk about the Trump MAGA evolution and the wielding of power concedes the state legitimacy. But the Ancap solution, we abolish, don't reform or take over the apparatus, right? Like I covered Hazaldine. He wants to use the system itself. He wants to use democracy against itself to destroy democracy. We don't, Agorist, Ancap solution, we want to abolish it, not take it over. We don't want to take it over and destroy it from within. We reject the voting party politics as a distraction from building voluntary institutions. So there's no, overall with this interview, there is no deep dive counter-economics, crypto private defenses, or homesteading, or seasteading. Discussions of cultural identity shifts often imply needing a state or majoritarian solutions rather than voluntary association and free exit. Okay, so overall, the strengths here from the radical objectivist lens, it basically gets individualism versus collectivism clash. Nick is advocating collectivism here, racial collectivism. Like I said, objectivism prioritizes the reason, egoism, rational self-interest, individual rights. Negative, no initiation of force. But that's what Dave, the neo-prag, wants to advocate, is some sort of force to enforce the immigration. So again, so what's the solution to the immigration problem? Because it's either you're going to use some kind of force, it's going to be force immigration or forced integration. So that's one of the
prongs of evil there. It's got to use some kind of force to initiate the immigration. But the other side of it is that what do you do with the illegal immigrants that are here? Do you keep them here? Because that's going to cost a lot of money to do that. Or you deport them, spend the resources and money on that. That's going to cost a lot of money to do that as well. It's not going to be cheap. So what is your solution? Does anybody have a solution out there? Let me know in the comment section or in the chat right now, because that's a mess. So basically no gods, no tribes, and no group essences overriding individuals. So the strength here, reason and reality on foreign policy. So they're critiquing wars as irrational, altruistic sacrifice, which is interesting because Dave wants us to sacrifice based on his ideas of immigration. So this does echo Ayn Rand's condemnation of U.S. foreign policies: non-intervention is self-interest, not isolationism. The cultural observations, of course, they note the obvious. They're noting the leftward cultural shift under certain admins, or rightward reactions as empirical grounding. But objectivists here, we value objective cultural analysis without PC. So Dave's libertarian background often leans more individualistic here. Okay, so major failures now. Let's get into the major failures. And it's Nick's identitarianism and racialism. His worldview, the white advocacy, Catholic, theocratic elements, group-based analysis of Jews, Israel behind the state power, is anti-objectivist collectivism. So Ayn Rand rejected racism as the lowest and most crudely primitive form of collectivism. As you know, that's her quote there. Individuals have rights. Races, ethnicities do not as groups. White people or Jews as monolithic actors, right? They think they're all big one monolithic, violates atomistic individualism. Of course, and Dave does push back here somewhat, libertarian versus identity lens, which is better. At least he got some kind of pushback there, as we just watched there. And here's the element of Nick's, here's of his theocracy, authoritarianism hints. Well, I mean, Dave does support some authoritarian hints as well about the immigration enforcement. He talks about Fuentes' Catholicism's. It does clash with Ayn Rand's atheism and anti-altruist ethics, of course. Forcing Catholic social order via state power is statism. Yeah. Now let's point out Dave's inconsistencies now. As a Rothbard here admirer who wants to abolish the government, he does well platforming for open discourse, free speech as marketplace of ideas, right? But allying too closely with illiberal nationalists risks diluting what? Principled individualism, right? Objectivism demands judging individuals by character actions, not group identity. Now, okay, just to get a little bit of epistemology here, heavy reliance on narrative, tribal signaling over strict reason, evidence. So, like, they talk about, for example, historical claims around Israel, the JQ often blend facts with the overgeneralization. Let's see. Now we get into the sort of the key flashpoints analyzed here. Israel-U.S. aid influence. Dave's angle, state lobbying, foreign aid as theft, blowback is solid Ancap. So he gets that right on there. Broader Jewish influence framing by some on the right risks anti-Semitic collectivism over analyzing specific lobbies, dual citizen officials, or AIPAC as interest groups. So it is perfectly predictable under public choice theory. So the main takeaway there is end all foreign aid. Private defense, let voluntary boycotts associations handle the cultural. Yes, that's always key to my worldview, voluntary boycotts. It is about the Trump power situation there. That is a good call. It calls out the betrayals. But however, the Ancaps here, we see all politicians as part of the ruling class anyway. Rothbardian analysis, right? Building power discussion often fantasizes about benevolent strongmen, opposite of voluntarism. Of course, the culture divides race, empirical patterns on crime. They talk about that. IQ, immigration impacts exist and shouldn't be censored. Truth seeking. So both objectivism, Ancap solution, individual rights, freedom of association, including private discrimination, open borders only with full private property, no welfare state, not ethno states or majoritarianism. The private property or maybe the privatization of immigration, that's more of a Hansen and Hoppe idea. And you might want to look into that a little bit, how that works. But here they talk about open borders with only full private property. That's Dave's framing. Dave's frame it as a private property frame. But the thing is, how do you enforce that? You have to enforce it. If you have any ideas how to enforce the immigration problem without using non-voluntary force, let me know. Of course, the standard the talking points about censorship, platforming opponents is good. True free speech is property rights based. Platforming owners decide, counter with alternatives. Okay, so overall assessment of this stream here is just these kind of interviews are valuable for exposing the rifts on the right and libertarian non-interventionist versus nationalist identity and post-Trump disillusionment. I said delusionment. It shows shifting Overton windows on foreign policy. Yeah, well, they talked about Israel's popularity after this. It's gone down way in the tank. Way, way low. Let's see. I think we covered most of everything. We summarized everything. We talked about the Ancap wins. That's about it, I think. If there's anything you'd like to add, like I said, if you have a solution about immigration with not using any force, let me know about it. And that's about it. I didn't want to watch all 3 hours. I just want to highlight some specifics in the interview and just touch on certain aspects where it aligns with Ancap and where it doesn't align with Ancap, and how it was aligned with radical individualism and how it doesn't align with radical individualism, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it. If you like these kind of streams, these kind of reactions to these, my analysis, doing analysis of these kind of streams like this through the Ancap, Agorist, and radical objectivist viewpoint, let me know if you want to see some future analysis of these kinds of debates and interviews with people for a live stream, every Friday live stream. So join me tomorrow for a recap of this week's videos that I did and see what I got wrong. I'm going to do a self-analysis. I do that every week, every Saturday in Japan time. I'll do that again tomorrow. So join me there, and I'll see, kind of see what I got wrong, see what I got right, see if what I could do better for next stream. All right. So that's about it. Thanks for joining, everyone, and hope you had a good time. And don't forget to leave some nice, juicy, delicious comments in the comment section. Make sure when you do make comments, I'm not going to respond to the standard, oh, this is just terrible. Oh, your voice is annoying. This is just AI slop. If you have anything specific you want to say about the video, let me know about something in the video, nothing outside the video, just something very specific to what I've been talking about here. And I will respond. Okay.